Ready for a deep dive? This one's a life story, feels kind of ripped from the headlines, even though, it all started over a century ago. We're diving into the life of Pedro Albizu Campos.
Oh, a name synonymous with the fight for Puerto Rican independence.
Exactly. And to guide us, we've got Nelson Dennis's War Against All Puerto Ricans, our main source, sprinkled with some insights from Democracy Now!, just to add some extra flavor.
What I find captivating about Albizu Campos is, well, you can't separate his story from, the bigger picture of Puerto Rico itself, its whole relationship with the U.S., its colonialism, resistance, that constant push and pull of power,
And it's not just, dusty history either.
Yeah.
I mean, Albizu Campos' fight, that whole self-determination thing, it still resonates today, especially with all these debates about Puerto Rico's status still going on.
Absolutely.
But okay, before we get ahead of ourselves, let's rewind to the beginning. Born in Ponce, Puerto Rico.
Yeah, Ponce.
His childhood wasn't exactly, sunshine and rainbows.
That's putting it lightly. I mean, losing his mother at 4, and then, get this, being disowned by his father. That level of hardship, that would crush most people. But Albizu Campos, he's proof that even from those beginnings, extraordinary things can happen.
It's like, come on, It's a movie, right?
Yeah.
But despite all that, he thrives in school, earns scholarships, and here's the kicker. Becomes the first Puerto Rican to graduate from not just Harvard College, but Harvard Law School, too.
Talk about beating the odds.
Seriously.
But, and this is key, this wasn't just about, personal achievement for him. He goes back to Puerto Rico, this prestigious Harvard Law degree in hand, and immediately he's using it to defend the poor, the marginalized, becoming a powerful voice for those who are often ignored.
So he wasn't just trying to, help individuals. He wanted to change the system itself.
Exactly.
And that's where the Nationalist Party comes in, right?
Exactly. He becomes their president, puts himself right in the spotlight, and while that sets the stage for some, shall we say, friction with the U.S. government.
Oh, yeah, they were not happy.
And his legal battles. They offer this fascinating glimpse into his unwavering commitment to challenging injustice.
Right.
Take the Velazquez case, for instance. This wasn't just some, obscure legal thing. It was a full-blown confrontation. Respect, power, the whole 9 yards.
Okay, hold up. For those of us who need a refresher, what's the deal with this La Bofetada de Velazquez? Velazquez is a slap in the face.
Right. So Albizu Campos is representing Luis Velazquez, another nationalist who, let's just say, expressed his displeasure with the Chief Justice of the Puerto Rico Supreme Court, Emilio del Toro, with a slap during this heated political argument.
Whoa, hold on. A slap. And isn't this Chief Justice, from a super prominent family in Puerto Rico, a whole line of lawyers and judges?
It gets better. Even Benicio del Toro is part of that family.
Get out. Small world. Right. Okay, so back to the slap herds around Puerto Rico.
So it ends up in the U.S. Court of Appeals. Now, most figured open and shut case, right? But Albizu Campos, brilliant legal mind that he is, he wins.
Wow, that must have ruffled some feathers. Talk about a David versus Goliath moment. This wasn't just some legal victory. It cemented Albizu Campos' rep as, a top-notch lawyer and fearless champion for the nationalist cause. But this was just the beginning, right? Didn't his influence really explode during that sugarcane workers' strike in '34?
Absolutely. This wasn't some small-time labor dispute. This was a pivotal moment. Albizu Campos, he rallies the workers, demands better wages, fair treatment, the whole bit. And he succeeds, raises their pay from a paltry 45 cents to $1.50 for a grueling 12-hour workday.
Hold up, 12 hours for 45 cents. That's barely enough for a cup of coffee.
Right.
But this victory, as huge as it was for the workers, put Albizu Campos right in the crosshairs of the U.S. government. They were not happy campers.
To put it mildly, they saw this rising influence, his influence, as a direct threat, and their response, well, let's just say it was like bringing a tank to a knife fight.
They were itching for an excuse to crack down. So what'd they do? How'd they try to silence him? They weren't messing around, were they? What'd they do? Bring in the feds, start tapping phones, the whole shebang.
Oh, it was a full-on crackdown. First, they appoint this Jen Blanton Winship as governor.
Didn't he have a reputation for, well, let's just say, not being the most subtle guy?
You could say that. Under Winship, the Insular Police, they're practically a military unit now. Tear gas, Tommy guns, the works. It was all about intimidation, silencing dissent before it even began.
Wow, talk about sending a message, right? But it wasn't just brute force, though, right? They were playing a deeper game, too, weren't they?
Absolutely. They went full-on surveillance mode. Albizu Campos, the entire Nationalist Party, they were under a microscope, phones tapped, mail intercepted. I mean, they were reading his personal letters.
No way, seriously. That's some serious Big Brother stuff.
It was like something out of a spy film. They were watching his every move, desperate to find something, anything to use against him.
So it's like he couldn't even breathe without them knowing, right?
Yeah.
But what's interesting? It seems like what they were really afraid of were his words. His ability to rally and inspire.
You hit the nail on the head. Their biggest fear was that he would spark a revolution, that his words would become action.
And that fear, it led to a truly horrific event that shook the island to its core, the Rio Piedras massacre.
October 24th, 1935. Police, under Winship's direct command, they raid a student rally, open fire on unarmed students. 4 people dead, including the Nationalist Party treasurer.
This wasn't some back alley incident. This was broad daylight, right on the University of Puerto Rico campus. Witnesses everywhere. Just unbelievable.
A calculated act of brutality. They wanted to crush the spirit of the independence movement. But if the massacre itself wasn't chilling enough, the aftermath, that really drove the point home.
What do you mean?
Winship's chief of police, E. Francis Riggs, he publicly declares that if Albizu Campos continues his agitation, it'll be war to the death against all Puerto Ricans.
Those weren't empty threats either. Just a few months later, 2 more nationalists. They're arrested in San Juan, executed right there in the police precinct. I read that the newspapers even published photos of their blood-soaked clothes. Just horrifying.
It was a blatant attempt to instill fear, to make anyone who even thought about sympathizing with the nationalists think twice.
It's amazing how those in power, when their authorities challenged, they so often resort to fear and intimidation. But for many Puerto Ricans, especially those who yearned for self-determination, Albizu Campos, he remained a symbol of hope. His resilience, it's truly remarkable.
He was a beacon of hope, a symbol of resistance against oppression.
But even heroes, they aren't invincible, are they? Albizu Campos, he's arrested shortly after those executions in March of '36. The charge, conspiracy to overthrow the U.S. government.
The trial itself, it was a sham, a kangaroo court if there ever was one.
I can only imagine.
The courthouse, it was crawling with soldiers, FBI agents, you name it. It wasn't about justice, it was a message. Step out of line, and this is what awaits you.
So what happened? Was there any doubt about the verdict?
The jury, under immense pressure, they found him guilty. Albizu Campos is sentenced to 10 years in prison, beginning a 2.5-decade odyssey through the U.S. prison system.
Wait, 25 years? For a man whose biggest weapon was his words. That's unbelievable.
It was a strategic move. Dennis suggests that the U.S. government, they saw him as, the head of the snake. By locking him up, they thought they could decapitate the independence movement, throw it all into disarray.
But, if their goal was to silence him, they failed spectacularly. Even behind bars, Albizu Campos, he remained a thorn in their side.
He was a powerful symbol of resistance, even in captivity.
He's arrested again in 1950 and again in 1954. It's like they were determined to keep him locked up. And even in those brief periods when he was released, the surveillance never stopped.
Oh, they were relentless. Phone taps, intercepted mail, again. They even passed a law specifically designed to silence him and his supporters.
Seriously, what kind of law is that?
Law 53, or as it was known, La Ley de la Mordaza, the gag law.
The gag law. That sounds, straight out of a dystopian novel or something. What did it do?
It was essentially a carbon copy of the U.S. Smith Act, used during the Red Scare to silence dissenters. In the context of Puerto Rico, it made it illegal to say or do anything deemed, quote, against the U.S. government, or in favor of Puerto Rican independence.
So let me get this straight. You couldn't even, sing a patriotic song or wave the Puerto Rican flag without risking arrest.
You got it. It was a blatant attempt to erase Puerto Rican identity, to crush any form of dissent.
The irony is almost too much to handle. But then again, this is Albizu Campos we're talking about. The man defied the odds his whole life. He wasn't going to back down now. He kept speaking out, didn't he?
Oh, absolutely. Albizu Campos, he was a man on a mission. He refused to be silenced. He continued to fight for what he believed in, challenging the very foundation of U.S. rule, shining a light on the injustices faced by the Puerto Rican people. He knew the risks, but he never wavered.
So he's out there, right? Speaking truth to power, knowing the risks, knowing they're watching him like a hawk. How'd he do it? How'd he keep the movement alive with all that pressure?
Albizu Campos, he was a master communicator, plain and simple. Rallies, speeches, packed stadiums, you name it. And the radio, oh, he knew how powerful that was. He was on the airwaves, reaching a whole new audience.
It's like trying to silence a tidal wave, right?
Sure.
So what the U.S. do? They couldn't just keep arresting him for speaking, could they?
Not without, causing a serious international incident. This wasn't just some nobody. This was a Harvard-educated lawyer, well-respected. So they get sneaky. They go after his reputation, try to discredit him in the eyes of the American public.
The old smear campaign. Classic. What were they saying about him?
Oh, the usual bag of tricks. Communist, fascist, terrorist, anything to make him sound dangerous, to justify their own actions.
Sadly, it's a tale as old as time, right? Those in power threatened, so they resort to fear and lies. But for many Puerto Ricans, especially those yearning for freedom, Albizu Campos, he remained their champion. His strength in the face of all that, it's inspiring. But then, things get really dark, don't they?
This is where we get into one of the most disturbing chapters of this whole story. I mean, it's almost difficult to even fathom.
You're talking about the torture allegations, right?
Right.
The radiation experiments.
Yes, exactly. The evidence, and it's pretty compelling, suggests that while imprisoned, Albizu Campos was subjected to, get this, lethal doses of radiation.
I've read accounts of him trying to protect himself, covering his body with wet towels in his cell.
That's right. It's where he got the nickname El Rey de la Toallas, the King of Towels.
Just heartbreaking. But were these just rumors, or is there actual proof?
There's a Dr. Orlando Dami, world-renowned radiologist. He examined Albizu Campos and confirmed it. Total body irradiation, TBI.
This wasn't just some random doctor either. This was a leading expert. And the international press, they caught wind of it too, didn't they?
Oh, this wasn't staying quiet. Newspapers, Argentina, Mexico, Cuba, all over. They're reporting on the atomic lynching of Albizu Campos.
The whole world was watching, demanding answers. What did the U.S. do?
What they always do. Deny, dismiss, discredit. They claimed Albizu Campos was insane, a convenient way to dismiss his claims and avoid any responsibility.
A classic power play, right? Just sweep it under the rug, hope nobody notices. Except, in this case, the whole world was watching. But whether the radiation was intentional or not, it had a devastating impact on Albizu Campos's health, didn't it?
Without a doubt. In 1957, he has a cerebral thrombosis, most likely a direct result of the radiation. He's partially paralyzed, unable to speak for the rest of his life.
Think about that for a second. The man known for his words, his voice, silenced, possibly by the very government that claims to champion free speech. Just, I don't know, it's a tragedy. But even though he couldn't speak, his presence, it still loomed large, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. In 1964, something incredible happens. We're talking about the United Nations here.
Okay, at the UN, what happened?
Ernesto Che Guevara, yes, that Che Guevara. He stands before the entire assembly and delivers a powerful speech, and it's all about Albizu Campos.
Wow, Che Guevara himself. That's amazing. What did he say?
He calls Albizu Campos a symbol of the as yet unfree but indomitable Latin America. Highlights his unjust imprisonment, the alleged torture, everything.
Imagine that moment, Che Guevara on the world stage, shining a light on this forgotten hero, languishing in a U.S. prison. Powerful.
It was a pivotal moment, brought the plight of Albizu Campos and really the whole struggle for Puerto Rican independence to the world's attention.
Sadly, Albizu Campos, he wouldn't live to see a free Puerto Rico. He died in '65, still a prisoner. But his death, it wasn't the end, was it? It was like a fire had been lit.
His funeral, it was unbelievable. Over 100,000 people, they filled the streets of San Juan, mourners draped in black ribbons, a sea of people. They even made a mold of his face for the statues they knew they'd build.
He became a martyr, a symbol of the fight. Albizu Campos' story, this blend of triumph and tragedy, it forces us to confront some really tough questions. Justice, freedom, a people's right to determine their own fate. These are questions that are still so relevant today, not just in Puerto Rico, but all over the world.
He reminds us that the fight for freedom, it often comes at a steep price. But even more importantly, he reminds us that the human spirit, that unwavering belief in a better world, that's a powerful, powerful force.
And that's what makes Albizu Campos' story so important. It's a story that needs to be told, remembered, so we can learn from it, grow from it, and hopefully create a world where stories like his are relics of the past. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and until next time, keep asking those tough questions and never stop fighting for what's right.